5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at Jack 10 2020 and welcome to this session about blockchain. With us today, we have two experts who are really doing a lot of research about blockchain and the International Standard Content Code. So find out why blockchain is important, why the technology is important, and why you should be ready for the future. So let me welcome our two speakers today. First, the ladies. Roni Levy is the president and CEO of Access Copyright, the Canadian copyright licensing agency. Welcome, Roni. And our second speaker is Sebastian Post. He is the MD of Postwerk, an entrepreneur and consultant in the cultural and creative industries with a focus on digital innovation and decentralized ledger technology. He's also the founder of Lithium, a decentralized app for trusted digital content licensing. So this all sounds very technical, but I'm sure our two experts will bring the technology to life for you today. So we're going to start with Roni, but before this, this session is for 1 hour. And if anyone in the audience would be interested to have a chat about blockchain, about the International Standard Content Code, or have any questions that they would like to discuss in another setting than putting your questions on the chat, you are welcome to do so, because we've organized another little networking session for you, if you'd be interested. In order to get the link to the session, please send me a WhatsApp message to 00628211393130. That is 00628211393130. And I'll send you the link. All right, over to our speakers. We start with Roni. Welcome.
Thank you. I am going to start by sharing my screen. Okay, so I hope you can see that. So first I'd like to thank the audience for joining Sebastian and I. What I think is the early evening for you. It's the bright and early morning for me and mid-afternoon for Sebastian. It's really a pleasure to be joining you. I'm looking forward to your questions, both on this presentation and afterwards in a more intimate setting, if you'd like to join us. So as Claudia said, I'm Roanne Levy, and I'm the CEO of Access Copyright. I've been working with blockchain technology for just over 4 years now, and it's a fascinating area. What I would like to cover with you today is I'm going to share a little bit more about who we are, which will give you a sense of why we're exploring the technology and in which areas we're exploring the technology. I will talk to you about the basics of blockchain as well. We won't get into the technical details, but more give you a kind of a paradigm shift, how you need to think about what's possible with blockchain technology. Then I'll zero into the problem that we're looking to solve and leaning on blockchain technology as one of the aspects or one of the technologies that we're looking at putting into service to help us solve the attribution and rights problem. And I'll say a few words about some of the use cases that we're working on right now. And then I'll hand it over to Sebastian, who will talk some more about the International Standard Content Code, which is also a technology that we've been playing around with and are really excited about its potential. So, Access Copyright and Prescient Innovation. We've been around since 1988. We're what is called a copyright management organization. We aggregate the rights to publish works, so textbook, trade books, newspapers, and magazines and journals, and then we license them back out. We're actually a not-for-profit organization, so we just hold back what we need to run the organization, and all of the revenues that we collect flow back to the creators and publishers. Like I said, we've been around for over 30 years, and in that time, we've distributed over $450 million back to creators and publishers in Canada and around the world. So we're the collective voice. We represent over 12,000 visual artists and Canadian authors, as well as publishers, and we have agreements with other international, other ROs around the world. And at the bottom line of what we do is we manage rights. Now, Prescient Organization is a wholly owned subsidiary of Access Copyright. It is our innovation lab. Prescient shares the same mission as Access Copyright, which is essentially, simply put, to ensure that creators get paid when their works are used. Now, at Prescient, what we're doing is playing around with new technologies like blockchain and machine learning to build a more dynamic ecosystem that kind of reimagines content interactions. All right, so where are we at? The internet has been an amazing thing for content and a very challenging thing as well. It has made content absolutely ubiquitous. It has also, at the same time, monetized content and creative works. It has led, as you all know, to piracy issues, and it's made the discoverability of content difficult and often compromising the interests of both rights holders, but also the users of the content. So as I said, piracy is often renders copyright and digital rights management protected completely useless and ineffective. There is an abundance of content out there which has made it difficult for content to stand out and be discovered. On the value distribution side, we've seen platforms that take over and absorb the lion's share of the value that is generated and created by the content. There's a lot of exposure. If your content is out there, you get the content exposed. So it's never been easier to put your content out there. That is not the issue with the internet. It's the payout and getting the monetization back, the bigger challenge. And of course, with content verification, the user often doesn't know whether they're dealing with an original, with an authentic content, with a content that may have been tampered with, and whether or not the content has been made available with the proper authorizations of the rights owner. So when we look at these new technologies that are being adopted and are slowly rewriting digital interactions, we ask ourselves, can we improve on this situation? Can we, in fact, disrupt this situation so that creators can regain some level of control over the content and be able to monetize it more effectively. So as we look to the future and as we work on the vision of prescient innovation and access copyright, we imagine a future where that is truly the golden age for content consumption, that are able to answer these three questions in a positive way. So we ask ourselves, what if creators control how their works were used? What if users could easily discover trusted content? And what if the exchange of value generated by the content was transparent? How transformative would that be for both the content creators, their publishers, their producers, as well as the users of the content? So now I'm going to kind of break from the introduction of who we are and what kind of vision we're working towards to spend a few minutes on the basics of blockchain. So what is blockchain? I've got a quote up there from William Gibson from The Economist. I love this quote. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So in fact, a lot of blockchain is being used, but it's in niche places right now. It's kind of under the in the pipes, under what you're able to see, but it's starting to happen, just not evenly everywhere. So we look at where it's happening to imagine what it's going to look like when it reaches us. And that's what I invite you to do today, to really think about how blockchain may change the way content is distributed, the way content is interacted, the way creators and publishers connect with their content, and more importantly, with the users of their content. So what is blockchain? Anybody that's gone and spent some time learning about blockchain describes the discovery of blockchain as like going down a rabbit hole. You start going down and it's like you can't end as you try to imagine and truly get a handle on the paradigm shift the blockchain creates. Now, the technology around blockchain is really not altogether new. It's been putting together three different things that have created this kind of transformative paradigm shifting approach. So we're dealing with three technologies: P2P sharing. So that was, the Napsters, and a lot of that is still around. So P2P sharing, cryptography, and behavioral economics. So that's those three kind of disciplines coming together with blockchain. The definition that you have up on your screen is the one that I've found most helpful. And I will read it out and then I'll unpack it for you a little bit. So in essence, the blockchain is a shared, programmable, cryptographically secure, and therefore trusted ledger which no single user controls and which can be inspected by anyone. So it's not very long, the definition, but there's really a lot in there. So first, the blockchain. Why is it called blockchain? Actually, imagining it for yourself will help you understand the technology. So what happens is that transactions are put together in a block. So they're clumped together in a block. And this block is cryptographically protected so that you can't change it, or if you change it, you could see that it's, essentially you can't change it. And then another block gets created, and that second block connects to that first block. And there is like a secret code in the second block and in the first block, so that if anything gets changed, the secret code changes and the chain is broken. Okay? And that's where the term blockchain comes in, because these blocks of transactions of data are connected to each other in a cryptographically secured way. And anytime you change something in one of the blocks, the chain gets broken, and everybody could tell that the chain has been broken. Okay, so it's actually as simple as that. Now, it's a shared, programmable, cryptographically secure, and therefore trusted ledger. Now, ledger is an old technology. It's like one of the first revolutionizing technologies was ledgers, right? Debits and credits. And that's what it is as well. It's a debits and credits ledger. It's a database. Essentially, think of it as a database. Now, what's different about this database is that it is shared. So anybody could put things into the database, and it's cryptographically secured so that anytime somebody changes something, you could tell that something has been changed. So it becomes auditable. Now, because it is shared, because everybody can see it, that's what makes it trusted. Okay, it is those characteristics that make it trusted. And it is programmable. Now, that's an important element. Programmable is nothing more than saying that you can, in the database, create if then that statements. All right, so an example, if the price of oil goes to X, then execute Y trade, right? If a user pays Y, then unlock Z content. Okay, just think of it that way. So you could actually, in this blockchain, program actions that will happen if something else happens first. All right, simple enough? So the characteristics, I'm going to repeat them. This is what is really going to help you understand what the different paradigm we're dealing with. So people talk about transparency, trust, disintermediation, and auditability. What does that mean? So blockchain is the information that is held in a blockchain. It exists as a shared and a continually reconciled database. So that is simple enough to imagine. We all work with databases all the time. Now, the transparency, and that means that all blockchain participants are able to view data in the chain. Now, a lot of people ask when they first learn about blockchain, but some of my data, I don't want everybody to see it. So it depends what kind of blockchain you're dealing with, will determine the participants and what the participants can see. In a public blockchain, which is what Ethereum and Bitcoin is, the world can see everything. But in a private blockchain, only authorized participants can see what is in the blockchain. And then you have, blockchains that are both public and private, that have a mix of each qualities to it. Now, The Economist, when it looked at blockchain and did an issue on that technology, it called blockchain the trust machine. That was what was in the title, the trust machine. And it's these connected blocks that establish the trust. Now, the trust is in the data itself as it was inscribed in the blockchain. But nobody is saying that there is trust that the data is correct. We just know that the data, once inscribed, if it gets modified, we can see it. But it doesn't mean that we could trust the data but as it's been inputted. We'll come back to that idea in a minute. Now, people talk about disintermediation. So the intermediaries are going to disappear. Will the publishers disappear? Will the bank disappears? Will the copyright management organization disappears? I don't believe that the intermediaries disappear. I think their role changes over time. What's important to think about when you look at disintermediation is that the connection between the user and the content or the content creator is going to get smaller. You're going to need fewer intermediaries. And I'll give you an example of a proof of concept that we did that really looks at disintermediation and what that looks like. So the intermediaries' roles are going to change. In some instances, in some transactions, we needed a bank. We don't need a bank anymore. It's that kind of thing. And you're going to see some use cases that will deal with disintermediation. And I know Sebastian has some examples as well. And it's the auditability is also what gives it the trust. The fact, as I said, that if something is changed, everybody can see it. Blockchain is immutable and everlasting. So something that was put in the chain will always be there in the chain. You could edit afterwards Sometimes people think about blockchain and talk about it as an append only, right? So it's tamper evident. So if you change something, if you tamper with the information, people will see it. And if you need to change something, you're going to say, oh, that thing I said 5 blocks down, it really should be X, right? So it's append only. You can add information to correct previous information, but you cannot erase the previous information. All right. So that's how blockchain works, and that's what those characteristics are. Now, there's reality versus hype. We went through a period of high, really, really crazy hype around blockchain, and then things kind of died down. We don't hear about blockchain nearly as much as we did a couple of years ago. And so it's left some people in thinking that, that was just a fad. We don't need to think about it. That was just like, it was like, the flying cars. It's never going to happen. Okay, so we don't need to think about it. I would encourage you not to take that approach. There was that kind of hype. The hype has died down, but the reality is that many, many, many industries and businesses are using blockchains, are starting to experiment with blockchain and going beyond experimentation and including it in their production supply chain in particular. There's still some issues on scalability, particularly of public blockchain, not so much of private blockchain. Private blockchains are a lot more scalable, so that's something to think about when you're looking at playing around with the blockchain use case. There are interoperability issues, so there are different blockchains. It's not like one internet. There are different blockchains, and right now they work in isolation of each other. But lots of people are looking at fixing that so that it feels like the internet. That, it doesn't matter which blockchain you are in, you can talk with some information that's in another blockchain. So that is a problem that much smarter people than me are trying to fix, and I am completely confident will get fixed. So as I said, even though the hype has died down, the interest in working with blockchain has not, and many, many industries are early adopters and are starting to use blockchain in their production supply chain. Now, blockchain is not a panacea. It is not a solution to all problems. Okay, so often I will hear some use cases that people are interested in using a blockchain for. And I ask myself, but do we really need a blockchain? Is it like over-engineering the solution? So blockchain is not a solution to everything. All right. When we started working with blockchain, we wanted to share our learning with the authors and the publishers that we serve. And as you could tell, it could be a little bit hard to kind of wrap your head around the so what of blockchain. Like, okay, so it's a database and it's shared, et cetera. So what? What really changed? And so we came up with the idea of presenting it as the 3 A's of smart content. So like a TV that becomes a smart TV, the dumb TVs that I grew up with, you couldn't interact with. You just sat down and passively consumed content that was being delivered to you. Smart TVs, you could interact with, you could select, etc. It is the same thing with content. And when you apply to blockchain as well as other technologies, then you end up with smart content. And the 3 A's of smart content is what we call attribution, authentication, and automation. So smart content will allow creative works to operate as self-contained businesses. And that will disrupt the current state of affairs. It will enhance the value of creative works to both creators and users. So what do we need about attribution, authentication, and automation? So attribution, think of it as content. As it's circulating, as it's moving on the internet, at any point in time, you could tap the content, ping the content, and say, who's your creator, who's your right owner, and you'll be able to get redirected to that creator and right owner immediately. So it's content, that knows its creators and rights owners. And that is achieved by a creative work being linked to its lawful creators and rights owners. Now, there are a lot of use cases in many industries that look at attribution. And it's not exclusive to the creative industries. We see this in diamonds and precious metals and in all kinds of, shipping, all kinds of industries. The example I gave you is the example that we're working on, which is trace and tracking of visual art. The service that we have out there in beta is called Imprimo. There are actually a lot of trace and tracking of visual art services. You'll see if you were to Google it, you'll see a lot of trace and tracking use cases that leverage blockchain technology. The second A, authentication. This is content that knows who is authorized to use it. So what you're authenticating in this instance, in this example, is you're authenticating the person who's obtained a license, who paid for access to a work. So imagine a use case where students and teachers have been pre-authorized access to content based on their profile, based on which university they're at. And as soon as they try to access that content, it opens up and allows them to use it. The example I gave you here, MedRec, it's medical records, MedRec, is not actually in the creative space, but I thought it was an interesting example to share. It's a blockchain platform. It was created out of MIT labs. And what it's doing is that it's allowing patients to authenticate access to their medical records to doctors, right? So like I said, a reader being authenticated to a book. Here it's a doctor being authenticated to a medical record. And that authentication is granted by the patient. Okay, so you could see how we've removed some people in between, and in this example, you've given the control to authorize access to an individual patient. So change the players, make it a creator, make it a publisher, make it a reader, make it a retailer, make it a piece of content, make it a movie, make it a music, make it a book instead of a medical record. And you could see how things change. The third A is automation, and that is content that can automatically interact and transact. The example there is by another fellow Canadian, Bookchain, who's also working with a blockchain in the publishing space. And here, when a book is purchased, at the point of sale, the blockchain executes a distribution of the royalties back to the authors, back to the publisher, back to the jacket cover artist, whoever is connected to that book in the blockchain. Okay, so these are just examples to help you think about it. So future cases, I think I'm going to go through these quickly because I've spoken to them. Provenance, knowing where the work comes from, and in a visual art space, seeing who owns the painting as it moves around from one owner to the next. Direct interactions between authors and readers, musicians and their audience. Transparent licensing is something that we're going to see a lot more of, that blockchain will enable. Automated royalty distribution, I just gave you the example for Bookchain. You could imagine the resale right being programmed. You could replace that with lending. So you have, the if-then statements can be attached to a digital asset so that lending is automatically executed, or the resale of a book can happen, the resale of an ebook can happen, where the resale royalties are shared back with the original author and publisher, not just the person reselling their content. And you could also imagine audience as investors in content creation. So all of these use cases are actually, there are lots of initiatives playing around with these different use cases in the content space. So I'm just going to look at time to see how I'm doing. I got to speed up here. Okay, so this is a use case that we've tried out as we early on started playing around with blockchain. And this is a fan-to-fan sale of an ebook. So I've got an ebook. I love it. I think Sebastian is going to like it. I send it to him. Sebastian starts reading the ebook. At one point, Sebastian is asked to pay for the ebook. He pays through the ebook, and then the royalties are automatically redistributed to the author, the publisher, and also to me as the fan that stimulated to the sale. So it's what we started calling fan-to-fan sale of books, right? Taking P2P sharing that almost took down the music industry and changing it to P2P selling. So this is how the middleman gets removed and the business models can actually evolve to things that are very interesting. Okay, and it works. But when we did this, what we kept seeing and asking ourselves is who's going to make sure that that book that is attached to the smart contract, which is executing this sale, is in fact being done so by the authorized rights holder. It's not someone taking somebody else's book and trying to make money off of it. And this is what we ended up calling the junk in, junk out problem. If even though you're using an immutable blockchain where everybody can see if something has been tampered with, if what goes into the blockchain is wrong, ownership of the work, for example, then everything else that happens can't be trusted either. The junk in, junk out problem, it's a problem that we have today, and it's actually not solved by blockchain. Now, we thought it's actually possible to use that technology to solve it. But for that, we need to think about things that happen before the content goes into the blockchain, before the data gets pushed into the blockchain. And that's what we talk about, the problem of misplaced trust, people trusting that the information, that the person uploading the content is the rightful owner. That is misplaced trust. That's the approach today. Until you're told that it's infringing, service providers believe that it's not or act as if it is not. And we need to find a way to do away with that. So as we look at the evolution of digital interaction, Web 1.0 was the web of information. That was the one-way web. Brochureware is what we used to call it way back. Web 2.0 is where we are today. We have a little bit of Web 3.0, right? The future is here, just not evenly distributed. But we're really more squarely in Web 2.0. And that's the social web, the web of user interaction. And we're moving towards Web 3.0. Web 3.0 is being reimagined, redesigned as we speak. And that is where we're going to see machine-to-machine interaction. So from social web to machine interaction. I'm sure you've heard of the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. This is what's going to reinvent our interactions, our digital interaction, and move us from Web 2.0 to 3.0 machine to machine. And the thing I want to, because I'm running out of time, I'm going to go through these fast, but of course we have that extra session if you want to dig into any of this a little bit more. Web 3.0 will be a growth of new opportunities, but there is a lot of stress on the infrastructure. The markets are intersecting, and now we have a blending of users and creators, and everybody is everything at the same time. The key thing to remember, it's no longer the distribution of content, which is the challenge, but it is the trust and the trading of rights, the challenge. And we have no accurate or secure identification. There's limited interoperability between identifiers. There's an opaqueness in rights ownership. And we are reliant on identifiers that are in closed systems. And it's as if we're trying to run a global rights supermarket without barcodes. Imagine that. So we're trying to fix that by putting something, looking at the technology stack, the interactions, the exchange of data, the network that is happening between the content creators and the digital services that use the content. Because if we don't fix it there, then everything that happens afterwards cannot be trusted. The solution, there are lots of people looking at this problem and trying to fix it. We believe a lot of these solutions at one point will merge into one because there are aspects of all of these approaches that are relevant and need to come together. We're looking at open source identifiers, interoperability across identifier, media-specific systems, and smart content-enabled content licensing. Whenever we say smart content, we're looking at blockchain. So we're looking at an attribution rights network of linked and resolvable identifiers that provide the infrastructure and governance to enable the development of digital services and allow for legitimate use of content. So think of a Web 3.0 machine-to-machine interaction. For a transaction to happen around content, there are 4 elements that you need to have to be able to trust that interaction. You need, of course, the content file, and you need to know that it's the original untampered content file. You need identifiers about the content. You need metadata on the content, and you need rights holders information. Right now, these 4 elements are often separated. And so when you imagine a world of machine-to-machine interaction, unless you're able to connect these 4 elements, there's going to be a lot of pain in that world of machine-to-machine interaction. If we're able to fix this, we're going to be able to increase the legitimate use of digital content. It will complement the existing standards and identify, and it will enable open governance. And so we're looking at, the solution is looking at using ledger technology. So this distributed ledger technology is a synonym for blockchain. Network of linked identifiers, so leveraging the identifiers that exist today, but linking them, governance structure, and something to deal with disputes and claims. Ultimately, solving for that needs to be business model neutral. It will have a loose integration with existing standards. Identification of the creation, it will happen on any creation on the web, and the ecosystem needs to be able to scale. And so essentially what we're trying to do, as I said, is to connect these 4 elements at any point of time. Either they are connected already together, or if they're not, if you have any one, you're able to connect to the other 3. If you have the content file, you could find the identifier. If you have the identifier, you could find the content file, etc. The ISCC, and as we imagine this working and as we're building it out, the ISCC plays an important role, and Sebastian will speak to you about the ISCC. So I'm going to actually go to my last slide. Well, before last slide, just a reminder that the blockchain is not the thing, it's the thing that enables the thing. So there's a lot of things there, but what is important is that blockchain is just one of the technologies that invite us to reimagine digital interactions. Okay, and it is that the greatest value that blockchain has provided to us is to open up our imagination to new paradigms of doing things. Okay, so don't get hooked up on blockchain, but think of blockchain about the opportunities, the way it's inviting us to think about things differently. We're working on a couple of projects that use blockchain. So I talked about an attribution ledger. I talked about a trace and tracking tool for visual arts that connected to the attribution ledger, and another service called Fanship, which deals with books and fans recommending books. So all of those are actually, if you Google Fanship and Primo Attribution Ledger, you'll be able to learn more about those projects. And with that, I will hand it over to Sebastian.
If I may just say thank you very much for this presentation. I had already 2 questions, but perhaps the most important one is whether you would be able to share your presentation with some members of the audience.
I will, and maybe Claudia, you can think about how best to do that.
Exactly, you just can send it to me and I'll send it, of course.
Okay, that's an easy way to do it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go. I think it's better to go over to Sebastian for now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, very good. You can see my screen as well?
Yes.
Okay, great. So good evening.
Can't see you now,
You
but
can't
hopefully
see.
that's going to be solved soon.
That will be solved probably. So I hope all of you are well in this strange situation due to COVID, and I'm really happy to return to Indonesia after some years, even if it's only virtually. So yeah. My name is Sebastian Post, and just to give you a little bit of background, I've been working for more than 15 years in digital book publishing as an entrepreneur and consultant on digital distribution, data analytics, digital innovation, and blockchain technology. When I started working in the field of blockchain, which was about 2016, a group of people working in the media business saw what was happening with Bitcoin. We recognized the enormous disruptive potential of blockchain in the various industries, and we posed a simple question: what effect will blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies would have on publishing in general and the licensing business in particular? I obviously cannot go into details of the technology in this presentation, and I'm glad that Rouhani introduced you to the concept already so well. Nonetheless, I would like to offer you 3 slides which are supposed to summarize the basic concept again. So in a most general definition, blockchains can be described as decentralized and distributed networks of computers, so-called nodes, that validate and process transaction data, what you can see on the slides, to permanently store them into blocks of the chain. Once these transactions are included in the books, in the blocks, they are distributed to all the nodes which are participating in the network. And this distributed environment enables immutable payment transactions and the transfer of value peer-to-peer without the need for centralized institutions or platforms that function as intermediaries. So in a way, neither the banks nor retailers or other centralized institutions and platforms, but the network, the nodes itself, validate and settle transactions on a distributed and thus immutable chain. And once the blocks with the transactions are included into the blockchain, it becomes almost impossible to change a common consensus on the history of events and transactions. In a certain way, blockchain fills a gap by adding an entire new layer on top of the internet, an open, neutral, borderless, censorship-resistant, distributed network for the transfer of value. And this value could be money in the case of Bitcoin, or it could be content licenses or other digital or physical assets which are being traded on the blockchain. Rouhani mentioned already some use cases, and I would, due to the time constraints, I would like to skip that slide and go to the next slide. So, because when we began to work on specific implementations of the technology, we realized that we had one crucial issue that needed to be addressed, and that is digital content identification. Because before you can even start discussing content-related transactions on blockchains, we need to make sure that all of the participants know what content they are transacting about. Content identification is a fundamental requirement for efficient transactions in a distributed, decentralized, and increasingly heterogeneous media environment, where the parties that are doing business with each other do not necessarily know each other. So we came up with the ISCC, the International Standard Content Code. The ISCC is an open and decentralized identifier for digital assets that uses fingerprinting technology for advanced and automated content identification. It is a universal standard identifier for digital content files in all media formats. So you can use it for text, images, audio, or video. And it is a suggested cross-industry standard for all media sectors. The open specification and open source development are maintained by a not-for-profit organization, the ISCC Foundation, which I currently chair. This will ensure interoperability and transparency of digital content identification. The ISCC has been developed as a blockchain agnostic standard, so it can be used on any blockchain, but it can also be used, so to speak, off-chain, so online on the web or even offline. ISO has accepted the ISCC as a preliminary work item and established a working group on the International Standard Content Code. And I would like to encourage you to learn more about the ISCC on the specification website that you can see here, iscc.codes. The most striking difference to content identifiers you already know and work with, like the ISBN or the DOI, is that the content code is generated from the content itself. It's like a fingerprint of the content. And this means that anyone with access to the content can generate an ISCC independently and decentrally without metadata or any manual effort. And now, with the content being unambiguously identified, rights holders can connect metadata, rights management information, or other content-related data to the ISCC. With the ISCC, anyone can find these metadata and licensing terms which have been provided by the rights holders. So let me present to you a use case that you might all be familiar with if you are using social media like Twitter or Instagram. So imagine a user posting a picture on Twitter and you would like to know more about the content. So in many cases, it is really hard to identify the image, learn about the photographer, the rights holder, or the terms of use. So what can you do with the image? Above, how can users easily verify that the image has not been manipulated and still is the original content from the rights holder? With the ISCC, here I am. With the ISCC, users can generate the unique identifier of the content. And even if the image has been modified, manipulated, or published in a different file format, users will be able to generate the same or similar ISCC from the photo. And now imagine that the rights holder would have provided relevant information like his name or other metadata, rights or licensing terms to the content. This would allow anyone to learn about the terms and use the content according to the terms that have been defined by its original creator. Or it would allow retailers, shops to include and offer, sell or resell the digital content to their users. So blockchain will allow rights holders to offer content in new and unforeseen ways, and it will fundamentally change digital commerce as we know it from the Internet 2.0. So the old Internet enabled us to access and share media content or other information in a network that was supposed to be decentralized. But the business logic of these services and platforms on the Internet has led to an accumulation of power and control by a limited number of companies and platforms. And it is interesting to see that these companies negotiate the agreements with the suppliers and users, which allow them to control the supply and demand of physical and digital goods and assets. They handle the user accounts like registration or login, payments, debtors management, and provide access to the services and organize the logistics and the fulfillment. And now blockchain has the potential to disrupt the power of these centralized platforms. And as decentralized e-commerce emerges, new services, platforms, so-called dApps or D-apps, or decentralized applications, will arise that work entirely different in a number of ways. So instead of acting as centralized platforms, decentralized applications will use available content offerings provided by the rights holders on the blockchain. Like a sales agent, they will then support direct to consumer sales and peer-to-peer financial payments directly from the consumer to the rights holder. And because blockchain takes over services like user account management through self-sovereign identities and the payments, these centralized applications can focus entirely on their core function, which is marketing and customer services, for which, of course, they will receive a share, which is set by the licensor. So we can see a number of these decentralized applications emerging with very, very innovative digital licensing models. And through them, rights holders can, for instance, sell directly digital content or digital collectibles or limited digital editions. Speaking of, let me introduce you to my personal CryptoKitty. So what you see here is a unique digital asset with which I personally own. And I won't sell it to you, but it's noteworthy that you could try to convince me otherwise simply by placing a bid on the Ethereum blockchain. So I'm the true owner of my assets through my self-sovereign identity, and the access to my content is not dependent on Amazon or Google accounts that I might have to get to my digital assortment and to my acquisitions. So this is, in my opinion, the most significant change to the current status quo, that there is no more vendor lock-in. And it's not surprising that the visual arts world has embraced blockchain quite a bit for digital collectibles. There are numerous dApps which implement and transform the two basic principles of blockchain technology, which are decentralization on the one hand and scarcity on the other, into new business models. So interestingly, the same unique digital artwork can be offered to potential customers on various platforms. This platform, for instance, is called SuperRare. Another growing platform is called OpenSea, which is the largest marketplace for crypto collectibles, where users can buy, sell, and discover rare digital items. So the rights holder who has created the artwork has inseparably connected the commercial terms to the asset, like the number of copies, the price for the initial offering and secondary resale. And with these terms, basically any platform can sell or resell the same unique digital asset, and offers, bids, and transactions and payments are managed on the blockchain without any human intervention. So you can see here how desperately I tried to become the owner of this artwork. So my bid starts at $7 US and went up to 55. And currently this offer is valued at 166 US dollars. But the rights owner did not want to sell me this artwork for such a low price. So it is worth mentioning that in the case I would have been able to buy the digital collectible from the rights owner, the original creator would have received 15% of the transaction volume. So we see a secondary market where rights owners earn money with each and every resale. In the future, we will see a lot of applications for creative individuals, media organizations that support these business and this innovation on the blockchain, just like a new startup that I'm working on, which is called Elysium. Elysium allows rights holders and creators and media organizations to manage their identifiers for digital assets and register them on public blockchains and inseparably associate metadata, licensing terms, and rights management information with the content for a proper attribution and a fair remuneration of creative work. So I want to follow up what Ronnie said. So blockchain is not simply a buzzword or a hype any longer. Blockchain is, in fact, infrastructure on which anyone can build applications, tools, and services or software. And this infrastructure is available today and has proven to be reliable for more than 10 years already. So, and I would like to invite you all to get familiar with the technology and reach out to me or to Ronnie if you have any further questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sebastian. That was also really interesting. And also for you, I had a question about your presentation, whether you will be able to share it with interested audiences.
Yes.
Okay, so if you can send it to me, that would be perfect.
Okay.
And I'll distribute it. Okay. Yeah, so the organizers just told me that we have some more time if we want. And since we have some questions, I think it would be good to use this time, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Yes, great.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are quite a number of questions. One question was, you said that blockchain is, is there other alternative technologies to blockchain?
Yes and no. So as I said, blockchain is not a solution to everything. What people have been doing now, the technologies that people have been doing now are using databases as we know them, even distributed databases. Distributed databases have also been around for a long time. But the elements that are lost, the characteristics that are not available there is the immutability, the trust, and the ability to remove kind of the middleman. And that's where the paradigm really changes. So it's not as if we don't have a banking system. It's not as if I'm not able to get money from me to Sebastian, right? There's technologies that have allowed us, including the banking system, the financial infrastructure, right? But those technologies are costly. They involve middlemen. They're limiting. There are constraints at what can happen with them. So I hate to see it as one or the other. The banking system, as I said, will continue to exist, but blockchain will open up a whole new paradigm of innovation, business model, services, and allow in the content space, allow us to get closer to the user, allow the creators and the producers to get closer to the user and remove some of those intermediary, as well as open up new innovative models, such as the one that have been, Sebastian presented.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would like to add that maybe because it has been asked for the alternative regarding the technology, I would think that it's important to see that you have to look at your use case and your business and your the model that you are pursuing first, and then choose the technology that works for it. So it could be that blockchain is entirely not relevant for your business. But on the other hand, it could be for some structural settings or setups could be very relevant to be clear that no one can pull the plug. So for blockchain, one of the questions that you would have is who is in control, and who can pull the plug, and who can allow you to participate in a business or in a transaction, or who can block you from transaction. And that's where blockchain, I think, has a huge potential. So no one can stop you from accepting or sending a Bitcoin transaction, for instance. That's a very important thing. But if that might not be as relevant for you in your business because you know all the parties anyhow, then blockchain might not be the best solution. For me personally, blockchain is, or can be relevant if you are dealing with people that you don't know, and so you don't have to trust them because you don't know them, but you can trust the network that is executing certain transactions in a certain way, which is transparently described how the blockchain would do that.
Mm. So, and then there's a question, if it's about removing the middleman, so like the payment systems, the online payment systems that we have right now, Apple Pay and Alipay and so on and so forth, are they also working with blockchain, or is that more a traditional technology?
Yeah, I think those big players are most definitely working with blockchain and experimenting with it and seeing how it's going to transform payments into the future, and how their own models are going to transform. You may remember a couple of years ago, Facebook put together a consortium of players. I don't remember the name of the venture.
Libra.
Sorry, what was that?
Libra.
A Libra, exactly.
Oh yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
In order to actually look at and bring people together to look at blockchain as a payment system, and there was a bit of a backlash, but it hasn't gone away. Don't mistake them being going quiet about the venture as not working on it.
Mm. Okay, yeah, all right. And Sebastian talked about the apps, the decentralized apps, I think you called them, right? Are they already in existence?
Yeah, sure. So the example that I presented, the CryptoKitties, is, I think, the most prominent and the most renowned decentralized application. And it starts in the visual arts, and they are making their experiences and learn from the mistakes and the problems that they are facing. So it's a very dynamic and super interesting field that is working with what is called NFTs, so non-fungible tokens. So basically the idea that you can limit the number of digital copies and then trade these limited digital editions. And this is, I think, for a lot of media industries, extremely interesting and extremely relevant for the future. So yes, the decentralized applications are actually working, and also, but also in the, let's say, B2B field. So like the app that I'm working on, Lithium, it's also a decentralized app, which basically means that you don't have to register at our company. So because you are in control of your user account, and everything that you do is under your control, and all the aspects that deal with data sharing and the issues that we are seeing with social media platforms and the big platforms with hackings and so on. These would be something that you can avoid by setting up your applications as decentralized applications.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This is not directly related to the question, but the term fungible that Sebastian used is a really important term in the blockchain world, because that is the problem that it solves for, right? It started off, Bitcoin is about the double spend money, the fact that $1 If I send you an electronic dollar, somebody else can pretend that it's the same. So, and that's really relevant in content, right? Because digital reproduction is perfect, and you can't give it a physical meaning or limitation or control. And a business model in the market for those 10 books. Anybody who wants to read the 10 books, for example, imagine this. They would, if you want to be the next person to read this great piece of art or literature, you maybe need to bid $10,000 to be the next reader. Otherwise, you may need to wait 10 years to be able to get access to one of that 10 books, because there's only 10 books, and everybody knows that there's only 10 books. Nobody can copy them. It cannot get reproduced. So you could imagine that ability, that characteristic, when you could apply it to something that used to be physical, then became non-physical, can be quite transformative.
It could also be an example from the library world that publishers could offer their ebooks for lending, and they would say, like, our pricing is that you can lend it 3,000 times, and then you have to pay a certain amount of money to the publisher. And then if these 3,000 loans have been performed, then you have to renew your license. So in our industries, like in the book publishing industries, there are numerous applications or that way you can think about where these the numbering of certain transactions or the counting of certain transactions would serve for more transparency and much easier way of handling things. Also, and if you think about the subscription services that will certainly also emerge in audiobook publishing or in digital publishing, where you have basically microtransactions in order to pay the authors or the publishers. If you think about like 10 reads or something, how would you pay for 10 reads? And this is a blockchain allows you to compensate and to be transparent on these remunerations for certain lending transactions, for instance.
Okay, then I have a question from an illustrator, Dian, and he's asking if I am the creator of an illustration, can I use the code, the standard code, the ICCR that you were talking about? And sort of sell my work and try to promote my work without an agent? Would that be replacing an agent? Could this be replacing an agent? That's what it says.
I think it would not, so it depends. So if what it would allow and what the Lithium software would allow you is to generate an ICC for your artwork and then attach your price or your terms, your license to the content. For anyone can then have access to this to these terms if they find it. But agents have also other roles that deal with negotiating certain deals or certain adaptations in different media formats or film rights or so or cross-territorial transactions, and like traditional licensing will not go away. So I think direct to consumer, I mean, we have the discussions for a long time and direct to consumer transactions. I'm not entirely sure how that will go, but the interesting thing using ICC and the way to attach the licenses, that also the retailers can include it more easily, because currently you will be facing the situation that the shops will not carry your content and sell your content. but with ISCC and the attached licensing terms, they can easily include. So what you saw with the CryptoKitties is, or with the visual arts on Super Rare, there are artists that are building these artworks and they create smart contracts for that, and then Super Rare simply takes it and sells it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the opportunity that you have as an individual artist to say, well, I look at the way, so there are some README and help me files for how to generate this crypto art, and then these will include it into their shops without negotiating with the platform. That's very interesting, I think.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
Already it could be, so go to OpenSea or go to Super Rare and inform yourself how that works, or test from 2021. You can test the Elysium app and give feedback how that works for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. One question from me. Blockchain, from how I understand it, is making things very transparent, right? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So do you know how the interest worldwide in this technology is distributed? I mean, the future is not distributed equally. So maybe the interest in blockchain is also not distributed equally. And I would think there are some countries where we see that transparency is probably not the thing that one looks for. So do you know how it is distributed in the world, the interest in blockchain?
I haven't done a kind of an assessment of where we'd see the most blockchain activity. It's an interesting question. You may look at it actually by patents filed. Where are the most patents been filed on blockchain? And actually, as I recall, the US and China has a lot of patents filed on blockchain. China is investing quite a bit on blockchain technology. And it may not be one of those countries that are so into transparency, and yet they're not. They're, at least from an interest in the technology, not mutually exclusive, it seems. From an industry point of view, the first industries that kind of leaned into blockchain was really the financial industries, and that is because it started as a currency. Right now, a lot of the use cases that Sebastian and I have spoke about are not about currency. They're about value exchange, but not in the form of currency. So first it was financial services, and then right behind the financial is the supply chain industries, transportation, because they have a big provenance, trace, and tracking challenge. And consumers want to know where their meat comes from, where the products come from, where did they travel to. And that is something that blockchain is uniquely designed to help bring that level of trust into the supply chain. So you see a lot of activity in the supply chain sector.
Okay.
May I add, I think that blockchain has received quite a bit of attention now due to the as a layer to allow self-sovereign identity, which is, or decentralized identities, especially in this in the COVID period now, where we are speaking about COVID apps and so on, to actually have, I call it because it's not correct, user accounts that you control, where you do not have to log in and register at centralized services. That's a very, very important use case for blockchain. For me, the most relevant use case, I have to say, is to control your identity and to log into platforms with your credentials and not with the credentials that are controlled by Facebook and Google. So that is, I think, the most relevant use case, and that's the same principle for organizing your user accounts on a social media platform than organizing your funds in your wallet. So it's the same way of handling tokens or access to tokens or to information. And so it's a fundamental principle.
I agree completely with Sebastian about the importance of self-sovereign identity. A couple of things to note there. So people often ask me, what will it take for the mass adoption of blockchain to happen? What is that on-ramp? What is that killer app? You know, for the internet, the killer app was email. It was email that brought everybody online. So what's that killer app? I think the more I think about it, the more I think that it's self-sovereign identity, which will be the killer app, which will accelerate adoption and bring everybody onto the blockchain. The way everybody got onto the internet with email. And I think that it's that killer app. Now, what's interesting about self-sovereign identity is that governments are very involved in the development of self-sovereign identity. And it's happening not in small startups, although small startups are involved in self-sovereign identity, but it's across the whole ecosystem of innovation that self-sovereign identity is being tackled, including at the Linux Foundation with a group called Trust Over IP. So and IP is internet protocol, not IP as in intellectual property, but internet protocol, trust over internet protocol. It's really thinking about adding that layer of trust over the internet. And self-sovereign identity is almost the number one thing they need to solve for and working on. And that will be the on-ramp for everybody onto blockchain.
It's one of the most relevant use cases also for the European blockchain services infrastructure, which will be developed or is currently under development. So that will be a very important thing. And why that is relevant also for the media and the publishing industry is if you think it as like who owns your content. So when you buy it on Amazon. And that's a very interesting use case that I already described or touched briefly in the presentation. So if you want to move from your Kindle ebook reader with your library to your Kobo ebook reader, you will not be able to take with you your library. So that's a huge lock-in. Once you started buying your books at one vendor. And with decentralized IDs, the purchases that you do or the licenses that you acquire will be attached to you and not to the service, which is currently the case. So you can move your libraries. You have control about your what you purchase digitally, and this is currently not the case. And there's a lot of problems that are deriving from that situation that you actually don't own your content.
Wow, that's all very interesting and mind-boggling. Let me quote one more question here, and I think then we have come to the end of the list. If a publisher wants to set up blockchain in their structure, in their business, in the way they handle things, how would they go about it?
Not so easy right now.
Not so easy right now. That's yeah. I think the first starting point is to get familiar with technology and start playing around with creating your first wallets and testing how that feels and how that works and how easy or complicated that is, and then have a look at these. I think if you're in the media world, look at these decentralized applications and see if that works for you, and play around. So that then you can. And as a publisher, there will be startups, there will be companies, there will be projects that will use blockchain even if they don't mention it. Yeah. So I think that you will sooner or later get of course, a very cool service that hasn't been there before, and that this is based on blockchain technology in the background.
Yeah. I mentioned that we did a proof of concept a few years ago, which was fairly innovative, a fan-to-fan sale of an ebook. And we hired 3 young men, they seem to all be young men in Toronto, that were working with Ethereum. And over the course of the summer and a small investment, we were able to develop the proof of concept in the Ethereum sandbox. And that in itself provided us huge insight into what this technology really means. And first of all, that it was a thing, that it was a real thing. Like this blockchain is not going to go away, and it will really transform digital interaction. So that in itself was worth the investment of time and a little bit of money, but also got a better understanding of where the transformation is going to happen, where the pain points are going to be along the way as well, but where the transformation opportunities and challenges are going to come from. So just play around with it.
Play around with it and ask people like Rani or like me or others who tested the waters and who played around. And that was what I've been doing over the last 3 years, basically offering, like doing workshops with people that and just show examples and explain a bit more how the things work and what the advantages are. And then you, if you spend a couple of hours and days with the technology, at a certain moment it begins to click. Yeah. So, and then you are hooked up so with the technology. But it takes some reading and some consulting to get to the point.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've come to the end of the questions here that I received. Wait a minute, is there something else? Here is another question. Thank you for sharing about blockchain. This is very interesting, but since this is a technology new to many people, what do you think about the government's involvement? Is it necessary?
I think, Ronnie, you want to?
Go ahead, I'll jump in after you.
I think it's there are two functions of the government. One is to support the innovation. So what we are seeing here in the Netherlands, in Europe, and all over the world is that that there are funds in order to do research and development and build prototypes and proof of concepts, and so that it will be supported because it will be the basis for businesses for new innovation and businesses, which is in the interest of the government, of course. The second part is the question of regulation and governance of blockchain, because they are kind of autonomous system. Of course, governments need to make sure that they don't lose control about a very important and crucial element like a finance infrastructure and so on. So there's a strong regulatory activity in every region of the world.
Yeah, and it's going to be a balance because you don't want to regulate too strongly or too early because you're going to stifle the innovation. So it's an important balance. And then there are situations where governments are actually the users of the blockchain itself. And that is, for example, in the area that we spoke about around self-sovereign identity. They're not the only ones making sure that we've got self-sovereign identity, but government play a very important role in identities of individuals. And so that is never going to happen. We're never going to get a reliable self-sovereign identity without the involvement of government in its development.
Okay. Did this answer your question, Ms. Elvie? I hope so. Okay, yeah. So I think there then we're at the end of the list of the questions that came for you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing all this really interesting information. And thank you for also sharing your presentations. That's really great. And for your effort that you put into bringing all of this together. And as I said, we have organized another session. If you would like to join, I haven't received any, what do you call it, registrations yet, but I have also shared the link with some other people. So maybe we just go there and see whether there are some more interested parties there. Yeah?
Great. So the other session is to start immediately after this one.
Yes, exactly.
To join us at that Zoom for a more intimate session.
That's
and
right.
thank you, Claudia. Thank you for inviting us to this session. It's always a pleasure sharing our passion with others. And thank you to Sebastian as well. We've been sitting on the stages, so to speak, often together, and it's always fun and a pleasure to do so.
Yeah, thank you, Ronnie. And also thank you for making the time because you're so far away and so early for you. So sorry for
my pleasure
getting you up so early. Sebastian, thank you. And nice to see you again in Indonesia, even though, as you said, virtually. And let's distribute the future. Keep on distributing the future. Okay, see you. Bye-bye. Oke ya.
Mengawali hari dengan informasi terkini, menjadi sumber referensi dan inspirasi di setiap aktivitas. Melalui news video portal, segala informasi dapat disajikan cepat, akurat, dan lengkap. Dengan kekuatan teknologi digital, Midcom.id hadir dengan berita pilihan yang dikemas secara menarik. Midcom.id, digitally inspire people.
Sudah 15 menit, masih kejebak macet.
Tenang. Daripada emosi, 15 menit Anda jadi lebih berharga kalau bersama saya.
15 Minutes, setiap Rabu, jam 6 sore lewat 45 menit. Klik di browser Anda, www.mediaindonesia.com. Dan temukan pandangan berbeda, karena fakta bisa sama, sudut pandang boleh beda. Mediaindonesia.com, views and news.
Dalam setiap denyut kota, saya selalu menjadi saksinya. Disiarkan lebih dari 20 televisi jaringan Jawa Post Group. Jawa Post TV, paling Indonesia. Kebebasan pers dan gelombang era digital menghadirkan ribuan, bahkan jutaan informasi dan data setiap harinya. Beragam data dan informasi berserak di berbagai tempat seiring dengan perubahan dunia yang bergerak begitu cepat. Media-media baru pun bermunculan, namun kualitas informasi seolah tak lagi menjadi prioritas. Bahkan, tak sedikit yang abai pada etika jurnalisme. Untuk menjawab tantangan itu, Kata Data hadir sejak April 2012 sebagai portal media di bidang ekonomi dan bisnis. Beragam sektor diulas mulai dari finansial, energi, pangan, hingga industri kreatif dan digital. Artikel mendalam dan komprehensif dengan sajian infografik yang menarik menjadi karakter utama dari Kata Data. Kata Data berikhtiar untuk terus menyajikan beragam informasi berkualitas untuk kemajuan negeri dan untuk kepentingan bisnis Anda. Kami percaya demokrasi yang sehat tumbuh dari kehadiran informasi dan data yang akurat.
Kalau bicara pakai data.
Hidup terlalu pendek untuk membiarkan pemikiran-pemikiranmu, ide-idemu terdiam begitu saja. Untuk berubah, kita perlu melangkah. Dan langkah itu lahir dari sebuah inspirasi. Republika, start moving.
Sudah 15 menit, masih kejebak macet.
Tenang, tenang. Daripada emosi, 15 menit Anda jadi lebih berharga kalau